Hello and welcome back to a new season of South Bank Shows, our 13th, and we kick off with a film on the writer Martin Amis.
In the shade. We don't need no more trouble, no more trouble. We don't.
This is a true story, but I can't believe it's really happening. It's a murder story, too. I can't believe my luck. And a love story, I think, of all strange things, so late in the century, so late in the goddamn day. This is the story of a murder. It hasn't happened yet, but it will. It had better. I know the murderer. I know the murderee. I know the time. I know the place. I know the motive, her motive, and I know the means. I know who will be the foil, the fool, the poor fool, also utterly destroyed. And I couldn't stop them, I don't think, even if I wanted to. The girl will die. It's what she's always wanted. You can't stop people once they start. You can't stop people once they start. You can't stop people once they start creating. What a gift. This page is briefly stained by my tears of gratitude. Aspiring novelists don't usually have it so good, do they? When something real happens, something unified, dramatic, and pretty saleable, and they just write it down.
Hello, tonight Martin Amis and his latest novel, London Fields. Martin, son of Kingsley Amis, published his first novel, The Rachel Papers, to some acclaim when he was 24. From the start, he's been seen as a provocative writer, creating a grotesque world in which violence, pornography, and black humour combine with a streetwise lyricism. He himself has described it as the humour of neurosis. Now, at 40, he's the author of 6 novels, a book of stories, and a collection of his occasional journalism. His last novel, Money, won high praise for its manic social observation and hilarious commentary on the decay of the late 20th century. Since that book, Amis has shown his growing preoccupation with the nuclear threat and our potential self-destruction. First in his stories, Einstein's Monsters, and now in the apocalyptic background to his latest novel, London Fields. The location is familiar Amis territory, Notting Hill, West London, an area he's transformed into his own world of seedy streets, lowlife and urban paranoia. The cast of characters is also peculiar to Amis, who uses caricatures and stereotypes to work and rework the images and obsessions of his imaginative world. You've stayed in West London almost entirely. We went to New York for money and so on, but, and this is very much Notting Hill Gate, where we are now. The street life is, I presume, taken from the street life around here. What do you find so compelling about it?
It's where I live. I mean, the trouble is, I think I've got to move now. Because I did Queensway, you know, for a couple of books.
3 streets along.
Yeah, and then I moved a mile the other way, and now it's Portobello Road and Laverick Grove and the West Indian elements and that kind of thing. But perhaps it better be Wiltshire now, or the East End. I mean, you do run out of place, I think.
Do you have any sense that when you're writing about low life, you've got to, as it were, get it right from an observational point of view?
I sometimes say to myself, it's really getting bad because the low life that I'm supposedly immersed in, low life is now something I just drive through in my German car. I look out the window and see it. Whereas in the 60s and early 70s, I had been hanging around with this for betting shops and getting chucked out of park, youth clubs, mincing up and down the King's Road. Now, the idea of research suddenly You think I'd better go and spend some time in a police station or prison or something. But you start anyway, think I'll do that later. And then you find in the end that you've made it all up. It's true when I go to places like South Kensington, I find it creepy. You know, where's the rubbish? Where's the rabid pigeon? Just like the selection of your material, where your eyes go in the street is predetermined, really. It's, although I do go out looking for, you know, if I do walk Portobello Road, I hope to find one detail that I haven't noticed before. But I'm not really in search of the sordid. It is sordid. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that approximately 1 in 3 of the city's indigenous population is quite mad. Obviously, openly, candidly, brazenly mad. Their lives are entirely given over to a bitter commentary on the world, the light, the time of day it is. In every busload there will be 6 or 7 people who just sit there growling about nothing with tears in their eyes. Every cafe contains, at all times, a working minimum of 2 gesticulating maniacs who have to be shown or chucked out into the street, where they will hover and shout and threaten until someone redoubles their efforts to make them go away again. On every street you walk along, you find the same proportion of people who do nothing but fizz all the hours there are. Fizz with hatred or disappointment or grief, or fizz simply because they are ugly and poor and mad. They ought to get together. They ought to organize. They would form a very powerful lobby. They ought to organize and make everyone else fucked up and tonto too.
You describe London Fields as a murder story. It could equally be described as a murderee story. What appeals to you about that?
I don't know, it was some little news item that probably I'd read 5 years before I started the novel, which just had some review of a book, and it said there is this theory that people who are murdered are not genetically, but as it were, disposed towards being murdered. And I thought that's sort of interesting. But so in my novel, I do have this girl who arranges her own murder right down to the, it has to happen at a certain moment in her life. And it's arranged as an artist would arrange it, in that people have to be whipped up into a certain state so that the emotion is high enough for it to take place. There is a murderer. He's set up as the murderer. Keith Talent, who's a cheat, works as a cheat in London. A sort of Willie the Dip kind of character. There is a murderee, Nicola Six, S-I-X, who's a dangerous brunette, 34 years old. And there is a foil who's old money, English, upper class, pale, handsome, credulous, Guy Clinch. And there is a fourth character who's an observer, the Jewish-American narrator, or the writer of the novel. And he has to, as it were, ingratiate himself with the main characters just to get the gen for his novel. I also thought it was a nice way of, as it were, turning the 20th century novel around, in that, the Jewish-American novel is a big, sprawling, dynamic genre within the American novel. And then to have him come over here and, as it were, do this tight tale of West London.
The characters were fascinating to deal with, but I find it quite difficult to talk about them in this sense that they carry so many ideas and they both exist in themselves and represent a lot. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I would accept that they are constructs in that they have, they're crippled by the weight they're carrying, in that, or more that by the strength of the contrasts involved. I mean, when I'm writing, I often do little diagrams thinking, well, if Keith is like this about sex, then Guy has to be like that about sex, or any other subject. So they are, I mean, there's something artificial in the kind of dance they do around each other.
Like all the others on the Crescent, Guy's house stood aloof from the road, which was all very well, which was all very fine and large. But fear had him go where the shops and flats jostled fascinatedly over the street, like a crowd round a bear pit, with slot game parlors, disastrous beaneries, soup queues, army hostels with life set out on barrows, on ping-pong tables, on decapitated porta-cabins. The voodoo and the hunger, the dreadlocks and the dreadnoughts, the Keiths and Kaths of the Portobello Road.
This is officially the hottest summer since records began.
Naturally, Guy had been there before, in search of a corn-fed chicken or a bag of Nicaraguan coffee. But now he was looking for the thing itself.
Guy feels too padded and insulated by wealth and space that he has, and is in search of something, which he, for want of a better word, calls life, because he feels he isn't getting anything. But really what he's in search of is love. And that's what he's after. That's what sends him out into society. The downward journey through society is something that's always interested me. I find right from the start I've had this worry about what I'm doing morally by creating characters and putting them through ordeals. Really, it's a theological question, because the writer is in a godlike relationship to what he creates. I do give my characters a hammering and enjoy doing it and laugh at the typewriter often. And yet something says, you know, how dare you do this? This is cruel. This is sadistic.
Keith had no intention or no desire to be a cheat for the rest of his life. Even he found the work demoralizing. And mere cheating would never get him the things he wanted, the goods and services he wanted, not while a series of decisive wins at the turf accountants continued to elude him. He sensed that Keith's talent had been put here for something a little bit special. To be fair, it must be said that murder was not on his mind, not yet, except perhaps in some ghostly potentia that precedes all thought and action. Character is destiny. Keith had often been told by various magistrates, girlfriends, and probation officers that he had a poor character, and he had always fondly owned up to the fact. But did that mean he had a poor destiny?
In your novels, again and again, we have one character he's lucky to bump along the gutter, really. Is a cheat, a yob, and another character, part of high culture, as it were. Well-educated, often well-endowed with wealth and possessions.
Luck.
And luck. And you have this opposition, contradiction, whatever you want to call it, between the two. What attracts you so much to these polarities? And do you see them as polarities?
Mainly that they're fun to write about. The shades and nuances of middle-class life, as I say, well covered elsewhere. And also, I think, a basic feeling of, you know, why should the Honourable Guy Clinch have all the money? Why? I mean, who says? And it's not a sort of political feeling. It's a social unease. I mean, close to riot, though many of the streets around here are, I'm surprised they're not closer.
Because of the unevenness of distribution, though.
Yeah, and settled unevennesses, you know, hardened unevennesses that have gone on for hundreds of years. And the class system, the amazing tenacity of the class system, I like to study not in, you know, two roughly equivalent people one-upping each other over napkins and doilies, but savage contrast between what some people have and what they don't. Excites me as a writer.
In this novel, the narrator Sampson takes over the flat of a London writer whose initials are M.A., and he has a flat in this district and so on and so forth. What parts of your own life and the real Martin Amis self are you prepared to put into novels, and why do you seem to want to?
I never have been a very autobiographical writer. The Rachel Papers was my most autobiographical by far. So this perhaps makes me more inclined to have these walk-ons in other novels. Answer me something. Do you sort of set yourself a time to write every day, or do you just write when you feel like it, or what? Martin Amis sighed and said, "You really want to know? I get up at 7 and write straight through till 12. 12 to 1, I read Russian poetry. In translation, alas. A quick lunch, then art history until 3. After that, it's philosophy for an hour, nothing technical, nothing hard. 4 to 5, European history, 1848 and all that. 5 to 6, I improve my German. And from then until dinner, well, I just relax and read whatever the hell I like, usually Shakespeare." But that's meant to be a somewhat idealized version of my day. How does my day go? I think almost the most interesting thing about anyone is how do they spend their average day. I get up about 8:30, cereal with perhaps some banana chopped into it. I then usually drive, occasionally walk from the house to this flat where I work. Then I find that I have about 4 or 5 hours of prime time of working. It's the only time of the day I'm any good. Take me up to 2, then play tennis usually. Then 4 to 6 I read or watch some darts match I taped from the night before. And then back home, time with the children, read, watch television, that's it.
A very powerful subplot of the novel concerns Keith Talent and his great desire to be in the finals of the darts tournament, and we follow that through right the way through. It's an important plot line. What do you find attractive about writing about Keith, first of all, and why did you give him darts particularly?
Well, it was going to be snooker for a while, but until I realized that was too complicated and interesting. Darts is the crudest possible form of human striving that I could come up with. Even 10-pin bowling is like chess compared to darts. There's really nothing to be said about darts. I mean, it's...
Took 15 seconds.
There it is, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Darts. You can tell someone everything you know about darts in 15 seconds. There's no technique. It's just hurling, chucking a dart at a bit of board. So I wanted to imbue that with all sorts of fake mystique from Keith's point of view.
Wedged in one of the traffic jams that routinely enchained his day, Keith would mentally pursue an alternative vision, one of wealth, fame, and a kind of spangled superlegitimacy, the chrome spokes of a possible future in world darts. Tears at the dartboard, lacrimae at the hockey. This was Keith's personal vision of male heroism and transcendence, of male grace under pressure. He remembered Kim Twemlow in the semi of last year's World Championship. The guy was in agony up there, and now Keith flinched as he saw again the tear tracks on that Trek's white face, trailing 4-0 and 2 legs down in the 5th. No one, not even Keith, had given him a fucking prayer. A burst gastric ulcer, they said later, brought on by a few curries and a late night out. But what does the guy do? Calls a 10-minute medical delay, sinks a few scotches, wipes away his tears, picks up his darts, and he throws. And he throws. 5-4 it was in the end. And the next night, he only goes out there and butchers Johnny Kentish in the big one. 7-0. In it.
Keith is a Sun reader. Then after a wrenching period, he goes down market to the Daily Sport or the Sunday Sport, which I call the Morning Lark. Actually, you might have to cut this for libel. But and then it's not just gotcha and all the rest of the Sun's Yelp phrases. It's stories about aliens stole my boobs and
Hitler alive on the moon.
that sort of Buddy Holly living with President Kennedy on the planet Krypton is the sort of average.
Presley returns as Gorbachev.
Yeah. So that's what's going on in his head.
The sort of superficialities of contemporary culture, which most novelists would say, well, I'm above, beyond, deeper than, apart from that. You scoop in.
Yeah, I think you go for the common man. I think have him in.
Why did you want Keith to be so dead in the head? I mean, you pummel Keith in a way, don't you? He becomes not so much a punchbag. That's not right. But he becomes someone that you seem to lay into. His ignorance you make a great deal of.
I think there's a lot of pathos in ignorance. In Money, the narrator is ignorant and often wishes he wasn't. He doesn't know why the rain falls, and at one point he says how dismal it is to look out of the window and see the rain and not know why it falls, which is, in fact, it's a quote from Chekhov. It's so you give him something and yet you keep it from him at the same time. I mean, I think Keith's great. I never feel any disapproval for any of my characters. I love them all.
You do love Keith, and you protect him in the prose in the book, and yet he's a man who bashes an Asian woman to get her husband to open the safe in a raid they have in a shop. He doesn't, but you protect him because he doesn't bash her as hard as the next bloke.
The talent.
But he's been a sort of failed rapist, but still he's attempted that. So a lot of people would say he's a reprehensible, to put it mildly, character, somebody that it's quite difficult to feel enormous affection for, and yet there's no doubt that you, and therefore I, the reader, are propelled into, you propel the reader, by myself, into feeling a great deal of affection for him, while having this little worrying tick going on all the time. Should I be really like this person?
Yes. If I'm sure of anything, it's that I'm a comic writer, and that all these bleaknesses or even terrors that you deal with are, to an extent, made bearable or even domesticated by the fact that they're dealt with in comedy and laughed at. It's a risky area, what we find funny or amusing or endearing. The novel, as it's evolved, the comic novel has taken in riskier characters increasingly, so that the villain isn't just a buffoon or a wag. The characters you laugh at aren't just ridiculous, but hideous and sinister. Nabokov has some great line about this. He says that you don't, in the comic novel, you don't punish the gangster by having him, sent down or tritely converted to Christianity. You punish him by watching that questing fingernail burrowing in his nostril as he's forming some deal. You laugh him off the stage.
One major character we haven't mentioned, who's your version of an infant phenomenon in a way, this child Marmaduke, whose characteristic is that he attacks everybody, particularly his father, Guy. It's Guy's son. Where did the idea come from, and how did you build him up?
Yes, this is an SAS baby, the one that isn't born in a delivery room but comes crashing through the window with 2 machine guns and strapped round his waist and 5 tear gas grenades. Well, he's not based on my own sons, who are rather remarkable little boys, well behaved and so on. It's like the comedy of humors, where all the character has to do is more of the same. The trouble is that it has to be worse the next time. So, and by the end, you're wondering whether you can have Marmaduke diving from the balustrade and sinking his teeth into new ways for him to be terrible.
Can you just tell us a bit about your own background, a bit about the what sort of childhood you have, what sort of how you grew up, what you saw as you were growing up?
I was born into poverty in South Wales, but the poverty was over by the time I knew what was going on. I do have a dim memory of the shared flat in Mumbles in Swansea. But after a while, my father started to publish, and suddenly we were in a house. My mother also came into some money. I remember my parents running around the house screaming because at last they had some space to scream in.
Did you go to state schools with your friends?
Yeah, state schools, grammars. Later crammers, because my education collapsed. There was a convulsion in my parents broke up when I was about 12. Then we came back to London. I went to a grammar school in Battersea. I was expelled from that. Then it was thought something had to be done, so I moved to my father's house. And he was then married to the novelist Elizabeth Jane Howard, and she took my education under her wing and started having me read Jane Austen and got me going on literature. Until then, I'd just been reading comics, basically, or rereading comics.
Did you surprise yourself that, as it were, you took to reading through Jane Austen?
With the first Jane Austen I read, I came across one of the central mysteries of fiction, and Jane Austen is the best example. But I'd read about 20 pages, and I said to my stepmother, does Elizabeth marry Darcy? Does Jane marry Bingley? And she said, I'm not telling you. And then I read another 10 pages, and I said, look, you've got to tell me. And she said, yes, they do. And I was hugely relieved.
Did the reading and the writing come at the same time, as it were? You started to read seriously and thought, I'm going to write.
No, it came earlier, and I think as it does with all writers, it comes with adolescence. So even when I was reading comics, I thought, I want to be a writer. And this was before I knew my father was a writer, but I didn't know what kind of writer he was.
Did it put a slight block on you, knowing your father was a writer, having your father as a writer?
Well, for all I knew, he could have been writing supermarket romances or even westerns. I just knew he was a writer. I didn't know he was a mainstream novelist. I didn't really know what that was. But I had the apprehension that that's what I wanted to be.
You developed what's been called highly virtuoso individual style. Is there any way we can attempt to talk about that and see how far we get?
Yeah, well, some people find it exhausting. And my father and my sort of running friendly feud with him, this book is dedicated to him, says, he should have more sentences that just go, he finished his drink and left. And I think that he should have fewer sentences that are like that. I mean, it's just a question of how much dead matter do you allow yourself in a book. I would die a little to write that sentence. I think if you're going to put it as flatly as that, I believe in modulation, and you've got to have quieter bits and so on. But I don't want to write a sentence that any guy could have written. But it's not a compulsion. It's not as if you take a flat bit of prose that your head produces and then boil it up with style. It's embedded in your perceptions. You see it in that style. And once I'm working on a sentence, I say it in my head until it's okay, and I rearrange it in my head, and then it comes out sounding the way I want it.
And television was all about everything he did not have, and was full of all the people he did not know and could never be. Television was the great shop front, lightly electrified, up against which Keith crushed his nose. But he could no longer bear to watch television at the normal speed, unmediated by the remote and by the tyranny of his own fag-browned thumb. Pause. Slow-mo. Picture search. What he was after were images of sex, violence, and sometimes money. Keith watched his 6 hours' worth at high speed. Often it was all over in 20 minutes.
Our time is different. All times are different, but our time is different. a new fall, an infinite fall, underlies the usual, indeed traditional, presentiments of decline. To take only one example, this would help explain why something seems to have gone wrong with time, with modern time. The past and the future, equally threatened, equally cheapened, now huddle in the present. The present feels narrower, the present feels straitened, discrepant, as the planet lives from day to day. It has been said by Saul Bellow that the modern situation is one of suspense. No one at all has any idea how things will turn out. What we are experiencing, in as much as it can be experienced, is the experience of nuclear war. Because the anticipation, the anxiety, the suspense is the only experience of nuclear war that anyone is going to get. The reality of different kinds of death in a world without discourse could hardly be called human experience any more than such temporary sentience as remained could be called human life. It would just be human death. So this is it. This is nuclear war, and it is ruining everything. People used to remark on how hysterical and self-destructive all my characters were. And later, after I identified my anxieties about nuclear weapons and the toiletization of the planet, I look back and it seemed to me that perhaps all my books are about this, and it expresses itself in the hysteria and wantonness of my characters. It's as if they're heading towards an ending, too.
As Keith followed her heavily into the apartment, Nicola did something right out of character. She cursed her fate. It wasn't the posture, the scrawniness of the shanks and backside, the unpleasant body scent. He smelled as if he'd just eaten a mustard-coated camel. The drunken scoop of his gaze, unappealing though these features certainly were. Just that Nicola saw at once with a shock. I knew it all along, she said to herself, that the capacity for love was extinct in him. It was never there. Keith wouldn't kill for love. He wouldn't cross the road. He wouldn't swerve the car for love. Nicola raised her eyes to heaven at the thought of what this would involve her in sexually.
The novel takes place against the background of a crisis, a geopolitical crisis. Originally, it was going to be a straight, old-fashioned Cold War, superpower, eyeball to eyeball sort of thing. But then I was considerably inconvenienced by Gorbachev, who made that sort of thing implausible. Really, I was after a kind of millennial unease, a feeling of mass disorientation and anxiety, a general unease about the fate of the planet. It seems to be quite common now for writers to use the imagery of the new physics. And I think the central reason for that is that the new physics, the study of what takes place inside the atom, shows us that that life is really, that matter behaves in a feminine way. It's not logical. It's more an intuitive kind of reality where, for instance, things can be in two places at once. Things can move faster than the speed of light. It's even weirder than Einstein's view. Quantum physics shows us that life is hippie-ish in essence. My heroine is given by me an interest in nuclear physics. And in a way, she's meant to stand for the planet, in a sense. Just in the same way she brings about her own destruction. Seems an awful lot of symmetry and form in the way the human species has put itself at risk in the way it has.
She had this idea about the death of love, which began with the planet and its fantastic coup de vieux. Imagine the terrestrial time span as an outstretched arm. A single swipe of an emery board across the nail of the third finger erases human history. We haven't been around for very long. and we've turned the earth's hair white. She seemed to have eternal youth, but now she's aging awfully fast. Like an addict, like a waxless candle. Jesus, have you seen her recently? We used to live and die without any sense of the planet getting older, or Mother Earth getting older, living and dying. We used to live outside history, but now we're all coterminous. We're inside history now, all right, on its leading edge with the wind ripping past our ears. Hard to love when you're bracing yourself for impact.
There's a creeping suspicion on the part of everyone that, well, if nothing matters suddenly, if it's the case that everything would stop mattering, who says that it hasn't already started? Also, I think, and this lays me open to most ridicule, the idea that the existence of the possibility of the death of the planet, either by bang or whimper, very much attacks the force of love in the world, in that it becomes harder to do. If the baby is to be packed into a bin liner next week, harder to love the baby. Makes the love more desperate or hysterical or something, has an effect on the love. Hard to love when you're bracing yourself for impact, when you feel your own existence is threatened. Hard to love when no longer do you see before you the orderly lines of generations handing on the baton to the next lot. And a key point about Nicola Six is that love has never worked for her. And also children are completely out of the question for her. So there is no continuation for that kind of character, except to go out with a bang.
Nicola Six is an extraordinary heroine in many ways, but one, the centrally extraordinary way, is that she uses all her arts, all her feminine wiles, if you like, and all her considerable arts of disguise, lying, organisation, humour, deception, allure, in order to bring about her own destruction.
What I'm not saying is that, they're all begging for it, or anything like that, or that women want to be killed. No, they don't. But this one can't work out a relationship with the second half of life. There's a point where she says that she's got to the end of men. She finds them too transparent and can manipulate them with such ease. Various elements of disguise, tone, and crocodile tears are her ways of shifting these brutes around. She satirizes love and satirizes sex. And they're both areas worn thin with cliché, with stock response, with received ideas of how you do them.
But there's discussions of Nicola's underworld, let us say, the artifacts of pornography. The pornographic element is a key part of her armoury, if you want. So what's going on there?
Well, the underwear business, do we really want to get onto this family program?
It's in your book.
Or cool pants, as John Self at Money used to refer to them as. Hugh Hefner calls it intimate apparel, and he is just one of the many characters who is in the modern world who has made many billions of dollars out of this notion. Pornography means whore art. Pornography works on men because the whore relationship is exciting, because it involves money, and money drives out feeling, because you can manipulate it, because you can have it your way. The great prerogative enjoyed by the man striding into a brothel is that tonight is going to be how he wants it done. Nicola sees that, I would say that it's no accident that Hugh Hefner's targeting people know what most men like, and it's the sort of hoary get-up.
Nicola was amazed. Nicola was consternated by how few women really understood about underwear. Perhaps women couldn't believe how simple men really were. How it could all be decided in 5 minutes at the hosiery store. At this particular end of this particular century, they wanted tight, bright white underwear. White underwear. They wanted the female form shaped and framed, packaged and gift-wrapped, stylized, cartoonified, and looking, for a moment at least, illusorily pure. They wanted the white lie of virginity.
Women, I think, civilian women are, as it were, reluctant to play along with this. She isn't. But, women would hope that it was more to do with emotion. They don't, in fact, realize how easy men are in the mere, sexual attraction area. Nicola Six is a woman who realizes how easy men are. I'm saying that in America, pornography business is bigger than movies and music combined. But I'm saying, what's the effect? What is the industrialization of what used to be a sort of connoisseur form?
On average, Keith spent between 2 and 3 hours a day in a largely fruitless quest for the sort of pornography he liked, i.e. pornography, horror art, and not the sex-free sex films slipped his way by other cheats or the rubbish you get in the shop. But there was a time when pornography played an altogether more central role in his life. When he was a bachelor, Keith had used pornography the way some people did heroin. Pornography pauperized Keith and made him fear for his sanity and his eyesight.
I would say that pornography is links up very much with the television idea that even our sex lives are mediated by images from elsewhere that we now all have in our heads.
Such as?
Sex is this interesting area where people are supposedly unbuttoned, more natural, naked. And yet I think, and watching the young and remembering my own youth, there was the aspect of the act, in that, you shouted a lot if you were having a good time. That was fashionable for a bit. These protocols that come at us from elsewhere, how you behave in bed, how you perform, these are all actor-actress words. When you get someone like Keith, who has no education at all, no ballast, no protection, he begins to think entirely in terms of television cliches. And his relations with the girl, which are completely shaped by his experience of television. And this she understands. And by disporting herself on a TV screen, she gets to the heart of what Keith likes, because it's at one remove, because you could speed it up or slow it down.
Or freeze frame, which is...
Yeah.
And because it's on TV, which is his...
It's both near and far.
Yeah. But it's also his ambition. Television is his ambition.
Yeah,
to be interviewed on
side.
TV having won the World Darts Championship is...
It's the other world.
Yeah.
And she gets right to the heart of his inauthenticity, if you like, through pornography. Whereas with Guy, she does this, what she calls these ads for love. They walk, it's like a advertisement for menthol cigarettes. They walk through the corn hand in hand. They do these ads for love. The romantic is what she stresses with him. So it's sex that she satirizes with Keith, and love that she satirizes with Guy.
Something that John Self says in Money. He says, "I realise when I can bear to think about it, that all my hobbies are pornographic in tendency. The element of lone gratification is bluntly stressed. Fast food, sex shows, space games, slot machines, video nasties, nude mags, drink, pubs, fighting, television, hand jobs.
It's a grim list.
Is this loan gratification, which is the dirty little secret that you keep referring to, this comes up again and is a drive in London Fields, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an admitted truth. I mean, the narrator, is it the narrator who says, or Nicola who says that it's funny how masturbation is fine as a subject in fiction. Portnoy's Complaint, wonderfully comic subject. But when the character involved is 35, then shut up about it, basically. We don't want to know. That it's, as Lawrence, I think, called it the dirty little secret. And there's a fair bit about Lawrence in the book. But it's interesting that we can take it up to a point and then we can't. I think writing is sort of loan gratification, really.
To come back to Nicola, you've often been accused of, you've often enough been accused of being a misogynist, putting these destructive women or women who are there to be destroyed in your book, and you will perhaps be accused of this again through Nicola Six, who knows. But still, what's your reaction to the look? Martin Amis is a misogynist, all his women are damned or damnable. What do you say to that?
First I would say so are the men. I don't think I've ever written about a woman with any hatred or anything of that kind. I love my women characters, even the most scheming and tricksy. I don't think, I mean, we're living through an historically sensitive time about this, and so there's going to be a lot of lopsided reaction. But, I mean, it doesn't touch me because I know there's no hatred there. On the contrary.
There's a view that a lot of your contemporary is to do with squalor and unmade beds and gutters and tacky sex and lavatorial scenes and that tranche. Would you accept that this is a reasonable headline view? And is your view of that, do you relish that, or do you puritanically disapprove of that?
Of the reputation or the reality?
The reality.
I don't know. I mean, I think what I don't like about English society is fastidiousness, which extends to all areas of English life, I think. The lack of candor between people, I'm not sure if this is a sad thing or a disappointing thing or a necessary thing, but the fact that we reveal so little of ourselves to each other. We have our act, which is 5% of the reality. And the rest is all thoughts about how you're looking, how you're feeling, how you're going down. Dickens said, after he'd written Oliver Twist and got into a lot of trouble about that, he said, I have no time for a class so fastidious that it will refuse to look at these things. They don't have to look at it all the time, but they shouldn't pretend it isn't there, or that it's by definition tasteless or wanton to bring it up. I want to say, come on, this is really happening. It's like that.
So it's a compulsion towards sort of telling what you see as the truth.
It's saying this is the truth. It's not your truth, but it's my truth, and it's part of the truth.
Are you conscious of being end of your 30s, entering early middle age? Does that play a part in your thinking about the way you present the novel?
Yeah, it was sort of coming on me as I wrote this book, and I think I'll probably do that next. And I think perhaps all writers feel this, but I felt lamentably underprepared by literature for the unqualified nightmare of early middle age. I mean, there's an awful lot of sentimental lore about how, the coming of maturity, and maturity is what they call it. And words like, you reach for words like, wisdom and balance and so on. But as far as I can tell, there's absolutely nothing to be said for it at all. And you wake up in the middle of the night and you no longer have a choice about what you want to think about. The usual things you thought about aren't available anymore. And you lie in bed, as it were, listening to this information about mortality and death. I mean, it's funny that you can't get it until it arrives, until the information arrives. You can't understand it. And although there's a lot about death in that book, I hadn't heard the information when I wrote it. Just this sort of miserable one-directional idea that... and I think it involves a loss of individuality, because when you're young, i.e. sort of before 38 or 40 or whenever it happens, you always think that getting older and death is just a rumor, really. And although intellectually you're persuaded that you're going to die, some part of you thinks in front of the mirror that it's wonderful about me being an exception to this rule. You know, it's what a break that, in fact, it isn't happening to me, although it probably will happen sometime. And then when that goes, when you suddenly realize you're in the dance, then I think a bit of your individuality goes with it, and you might even say that that is a sort of crucial bit of the aging process, is this knowledge that actually sort of thickens your face.
And you're appalled, aren't you? Once you start thinking about it, you wonder how you could have ever thought about anything else.
Yeah, well, luckily you are given this 40-year holiday before the information arrives.